But you know what? Get a tenth of a Bitcoin and you're set. You can dick around the rest of your life. At some point when you're my age, like me, I'm retired now. And you can see if you look around me in the studio, this is what I do for fun. I just took up scuba diving. I'm traveling. I'm having a good time in life. I never worry about money because guess what? I don't have to. My wealth is in Bitcoin. So every year, I don't do jack shit. I'm getting wealthier and wealthier every year of my life.
Today, I'm excited to welcome George Bodine back to the podcast. George is a Navy fighter pilot, Top Gun grad, professional artist, and Bitcoin only. Welcome to the Bitcoin Edge, George.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your having me here. This is going to be a great day. Like we used to say on the carrier, that we're going to set conditions zebra, batten down the hatches, and then we're going to prepare for impact.
I love that. Well, I know a lot of people know you because you have been speaking a lot in the Bitcoin space and everybody relates to your message, but just give us a brief background.
Well, that's good that you mentioned that because obviously in your intro, I'll just add to that. I'm like an ex-cop, ex-miner, ex-cab driver. I mean, I've done a lot of different things in life, and yeah, I did go through Top Gun and became an adversary instructor, which was really great. And then I flew with Delta, ended up with a career and a captain there with Delta. I flew all over the world. But everything I say today is not financial advice. And I used to love to work on motorcycles. When my wife first met me, she came into the house. She was dating me at the time. She's a nurse, and I had an engine sitting on the dining room table that was torn apart, just sitting there. And then I had a chopper that I was working on. It was really cool. It ended up in a calendar. It was so neat. So I built a chopper and I was welding on this old wooden floor, in fact, when she came over. But she accepted me just the way I was. And I used to stick her on the back of that. It was a hardtail chopper. I mean, it was a hardcore chopper. And I'd stick her on the back fender. I did put a little pillion pad on there because I felt bad about it. And she'd just hang on to me. We'd go roaring through the streets. And the other thing I'll say is I had a traumatic brain injury from that chopper. I had a motorcycle accident. It should have killed me, but I survived. And that thing was really dangerous. I mean, it was like a killer. And so I told her, I said, I got to stop riding this. It was my second accident on the chopper. And I said, I got to stop riding her. It's going to kill me. And she said, I'm going to tell you something. If you want, and we were married at the time now. And she said, if you want, you can just stick that chopper. I don't care. You could put it in the house, in the living room, because I used to keep it in the house. And she said, you can just stick it in the house. You can keep it here for the rest of our lives. I don't care. But I knew I'd never be able to stop riding it, so I had to sell it. And then that's another good reason not to think of this as financial advice, since you're talking to somebody that's had a brain injury. And the good news is, when it comes to Bitcoin, I mean, I've got probably, I'm probably getting close to almost 3,000 hours of study on Bitcoin. I study every day. I was reading about Taproot today and the Taproot protocol and Tether and moving there from that Plan B announcement down in El Salvador. And so, just take everything I say here. I've been wrong many times. I'm going to be wrong a bunch, and take everything with a grain of salt.
Well, since you mentioned the Plan B conference announcement that Tether will move to the Bitcoin and Lightning Network, just tell us a little bit about how you think that's going to help Bitcoin scale.
This might be a little controversial for some people there are going to be some people that are already triggered by this announcement. Bitcoin is not going to scale unless we do something. And that's nothing new. Everybody, if you're a serious Bitcoiner, you already know what I'm saying. So I'm not going to go into that. I will tell you as an aside, I'm going to tell you something. Lightning, it has not been the success or growing as fast as I would like to see. And I think that Lightning and sidechains are really important to the scale and the growth of Bitcoin. In fact, in the white paper for Lightning, the Lightning white paper, they even mentioned, what their ideal size block? We've got our originally 1 and then 4 megabyte blocks with the addition. So their ideal was 33 megabyte blocks in order to scale the network. I mean, that would be impossible. So one of the things that could make all the difference in the world for Lightning going forward is this return. By the way, it's the return of Tether and tokens onto the Bitcoin network. And this announcement said that they would use the Taproot's protocol. It used to be Taproot Assets. It used to be called Taro, I think, and it's through Lightning Labs. So this is going to, in my mind, this is going to open up all kinds of liquidity onto the Lightning network, the channels. And I think that's really important because a lot of people here in this United States, they don't give a shit about Lightning in the sense that they're not worried about trying to preserve their wealth, or they're not trying to send stuff to their relatives overseas or down in Mexico or down in South America. And people down there, they like Tether. Tether is pegged to the dollar 1-to-1. And I think we're all done with that stupid argument about whether they have reserves or any of that nonsense. They have reserves. They've got over $100 billion of U.S. treasuries. They have more treasuries than Germany. And they did $113 or $1 billion in volume. And right now, they have a profit of almost $14 billion in 1 year. And they've got 100 employees. Do you think Tether is out there running a whole fleet of Amazon trucks all over the planet? I mean, what kind of overhead does Tether have? Are they building warehouses all across the country to hold Tether? I mean, they are a very profitable company. I think they're just going to continue to boom. And the CEO, Paulo Ardonia, he's a smart dude. And he is a Bitcoin believer. If you follow him, you follow what he posts, he believes in Bitcoin. So I think that they are morally and ethically aligned with promoting the Bitcoin network. And then what's the alternative? So if I'm right in that US Tether is not going away, and like I said, down in El Salvador, I gave people sats. I'd give them sats all the time. I was spending like a drunk sailor down there and just, spending, having fun down there. But those people, a lot of them, they immediately converted my sats, my Bitcoin, and they converted it usually into like Tether. They want that dollar because for them, Tether is a godsend. I mean, their currencies are shit and they're doing everything they can to try and preserve their wealth. And you and I, we're privileged. We don't have as much fear about losing the value of our money. And the last thing I'll say, there's a lot of Bitcoin maxis. If you had poop emojis on this platform, they would throw poop emojis on me for promoting Tether. And you know what? I actually get that. I mean, Tether's got some real issues. It's centralized, government organizations, police forces. I think last count, there were over 100 of them that were plugged into Tether, monitoring Tether. And if Tether continues to be a refuge for U.S. treasuries, they're going to get closer and closer aligned to the U.S. I don't know, the philosophy of the dollar. I mean, it's going to support the dollar. It'll make the dollar stronger. Now, as a U.S. citizen and somebody who really loves this country, and what I'd really like is I'd like the dollar to not just succeed, but to be based on some kind of a neutral basket or a neutral reserve set of assets. And it could be many, but I want Bitcoin. I want Bitcoin in there backing up of that dollar. And I know I've gone on a little bit here, but if you look at Bitcoin ETFs, there are a lot of Bitcoiners that are still against the ETFs in the space. And I would just say to them, why don't you just post one cogent argument? Because I've looked. You post one argument that I can look at and believe that is going to keep that from happening. How do you stop options? How would you stop Tether? And another thing is, if it's not Tether, where the USDT is right now, it's on Tron and Ethereum, and mainly Tron because Ethereum just sucks. I mean, their gas fees and everything else, they're dying. But it's on Tron too. Where do we want it? I want it on Bitcoin. I better stop now.
Yeah, well, it's a very interesting discussion, and it is better that it is on Bitcoin. It will always be in the fiat system as well, like you said, because they buy treasuries. But I study Jeff Booth a lot, and Jeff Booth believes that eventually it's going to be either a Bitcoin system or a fiat system. And obviously, if it stays decentralized and secure, everything eventually is going to be on the Bitcoin. So maybe Tether sees that possibility and is moving over.
It's possible. I think this is a wave that you're just not going to stop. And I don't know how this is going to play out. Bitcoin is not going to fail. I know you mentioned a couple of the key points that Booth mentions there. But, the days where I was worried about the system failure of Bitcoin are over. You know, it has failed in the past. Bitcoin has. I mean, it actually. I mean, back in 2010, in block number 76, I can't remember what block number it is. It was the overflow incident. You know, one guy printed billions of Bitcoin in one block. And of course, you know, they had to restart it. But those days, you know, you were taking a real bet in those days whether it was going to succeed. I have tremendous admiration for those people that got into that and had the conviction and the courage and the ability to stand the volatility and not throw up and just keep right on going and collecting. And, you know, good for them. But today, that's not the case. I mean, I don't have any problems recommending Bitcoin to anyone because I'm not concerned about it failing. It's not going to fail. You know, after the China mining ban, I have no fear at all of that.
Yeah. And like you mentioned earlier, we cannot stop this happening. Nation state adoption is going to happen. It's wonderful that the US is considering a Bitcoin strategic reserve. Tell us a little bit about why you think that's bullish for Bitcoin.
There are so many bullish things for Bitcoin. I mean, of course, I don't know. I'm a Bitcoin permabull. I mean, I've got all my wealth in Bitcoin or a proxy. I didn't intend to, but it just went insane. I've got a lot of Bitcoin exposure through a proxy, MicroStrategy. But yeah, I'm a permabull. I mean, I'm cast in iron. I've got, you know, testicles the size of cannonballs here. I am ready to go, and nothing's changed. You know, this cycle, the last 12 months, I never thought that I would see what I've seen so far. And coming up this next year is just going to be incredible. You know, we've got just so many things aligned for continued adoption of Bitcoin and an acceleration. And so I'm very excited about it. You know, my biggest disappointment probably since the Trump administration came in was the executive order establishing a digital assets stockpile, which I just called a degen asset shit pile. I mean, in my mind, and I've written, so, you know, I encourage people out there. I've written both my senators now and my House rep. And fortunately, they may be aligned along my lines, but even if they're not, you need to write these people and tell them it's, you know, strategic Bitcoin reserve. That's the way we're going. You know, we want to see the Bitcoin Act by Senator Lummis and I think co-authored by Senator Gillibrand. And but they don't have a lot of sponsors on that. That's another thing. Just write to these people because tell them you want that act passed. You want Bitcoin held as a strategic Bitcoin reserve. It'll be in there for 20 years before it can be touched. And there's a lot of caveats on how it can be withdrawn and what it can be used for. So we want that. That is what we want. So I was disappointed in that. But at the same time, you know, there's good things in that executive order. The real problem is that it's just an executive order. I mean, it's like paper. Next guy comes in or gal and it's gone. Or it could even be in a Republican administration, just somebody that wants to use the Bitcoin out of that. We don't want that. We want actual legislation. So that's what we got to keep focused on and pushing for. And I'm definitely focused on it.
Well, as Bitcoiners, we know to take responsibility and keep stacking ourselves. What's your message to the regular person out there?
Well, it seems like, you know, it seems like every cycle has got its own theme to it. And the one that I'm hearing, the one that I feel is going on, and I don't know anybody that's watching this or if you're listening, I don't know if you agree with this or not. You can leave your comments or whatever, but it seems to me like what's going on this cycle is that people feel like they're too late, like they've missed the boat. And I even saw this the other day. I was on the deck of a back of the house having a party, and somebody that I've talked to about Bitcoin before, I mentioned it to her, and she said, "Well, it's $100,000 a coin. I'm too late." Well, I'm going to tell you something. You know, I didn't know how to answer that. I suck at orange pilling people. I don't know what the problem is, but I tried to explain to her, well, you know, 2 years ago, I got to buy Bitcoin at $1,700 for a tenth of a Bitcoin. And I said, if you can get a tenth of a Bitcoin and you just hang on to that damn thing, you know, you can become wealthy. I mean, wealthy. Most of the people, I was out having dinner last night and I looked around the restaurant and I pointed this out to someone. I said, look around us right now. I said, and if you are a viewer and you're looking at me, you know that I'm an older boomer. But most of the people in that bar, they were younger than me, a lot younger. In fact, every one of them had 20 years in front of them of working and saving and doing things. Well, you know what? Get a tenth of a Bitcoin and you're set. You can dick around the rest of your life. At some point when you're my age, like me, you know, I'm retired now, and You can see if you look around me in the studio, this is what I do for fun. I just took up scuba diving. I'm traveling. I'm having a good time in life. I never worry about money because guess what? I don't have to. My wealth is in Bitcoin. So every year I don't do jack shit and I'm getting wealthier and wealthier every year of my life. So, I tried to explain to that person, everybody talks about the housing example. And by the way, I want you to know I was one of the first people to do that. I did that like over a year ago. And I looked at my neighborhood and sure, 8 years before, house was 666 up again, this mark of Satan, but 666. And then 4 years later, it was 44 Bitcoin. Today I can buy a house for 5. You know what? After this cycle is over, I might be able to buy one of the houses in my neighborhood, the average price for a Bitcoin. So I just don't worry about it. I don't remember exactly what we were talking. Oh, I know. Yeah, that's too late. So you're not too late.
I saw something this morning by Terrence Michael, and he said, if people are asking if they're too late, the answer is don't buy Bitcoin because you don't understand it yet.
Yeah, that's an interesting point because it goes hand in hand with what we just said. It's going up all the time. You can pick the worst 4-year period, the cycles, if the cycles even exist going forward. You can pick the worst 4-year period and it still gives you 26% return. You're not going to be beating Bitcoin. All you got to do, you're just sitting on a 3-legged stool. There's 3 legs. All you got to do is buy Bitcoin, hold the damn thing, and then don't lose it. And if you can do that, you're set. I mean, you're done. And you don't have to sweat. You don't have to sit around at night wondering what the Fed's going to be dicking around with our money supply or those 12 idiots. The Fed seems like they're just going from side to side of the road. They're just bouncing off the damn guardrails, constantly overreacting or underreacting or not going quick enough. Well, I used to worry about that all the time. I mean, before Bitcoin, that was my life. I just sitting there wondering, how do I invest? How do I keep my wealth? And now I'm not. I'm just relaxed. And you can be that person too. You can create generational wealth.
Just one more thing on that. I spoke to Larry Lepard, a friend of yours, last week. We also discussed that same question when people say, well, you got it at 17,000 and now how can I buy it at 100,000? Well, his example was, well, if it's the only life raft off on the Titanic, are you going to say no because because we understand the system is going that way. But in order to get there, you have to really understand Bitcoin.
Yeah, Larry and I are good friends. I was talking to him and I was fortunate. I got to read the galley proof of the book ahead of time. Larry asked me if I had some inputs, and I don't feel qualified to help Larry with writing, but I mean, I made a couple of things, but it's just such a great book. I mean, it's a page turner. And I just got the book. I'm going to give it out. I ordered like 6 copies on Amazon, and I'm getting hard copy from Larry. I'm going to pass that thing out. I mean, I think it's the best book I've read in decades on why. You know what? If you were to ask, why are we sitting here where we are right now? I think that is the best book I've read on how to explain that to somebody. Once you read that book, it's so damn clear. And, Larry's not, he's like me, he and I, we're just grunts. I mean, we're like warriors in the trench. I mean, we're not Jeff Booth. We're not the general out there directing things. We're just fighters, and we're just pushing forward. The only reason I came out of my closet to try and start doing podcasts was I wanted to try and help people. And he encouraged me along with Bob Burnett. I use that example sometimes. I use that example instead of the Titanic. I use it because I'm a pilot. I use the parachute one. You're in that parachute. You look out, the engines are on fire. We're all going to die. And I've got a parachute, and my parachute costs $1,700. I bought it back there 2 years ago. It's a tenth of a Bitcoin. And then you got some jackass behind me, and he's standing there without a parachute. And I'm not giving him mine. But if there's a parachute on there for a tenth of a Bitcoin, it's $10,000 today. He's going to say, "Give me that damn thing. Here's 10 grand. Let's go." Bitcoin's going to $1 million a coin. I'm an idiot, but I do know some things, and I am telling you without any doubt that's where it's headed. When we demonetize gold, right now, if we demonetize gold, it would be just under $1 million a coin now. Last time I looked, it was $926,000, and guess what? Gold's gone up since then. So you're looking at $1 million, and we will overtake gold. That's inevitable. So when you're thinking, so to everybody out there, if you're wondering, Just think about how much you're going to pay for a parachute. And when it's $1 million, you're going to have to come up with $100,000 to get what I got for $1,700, and it's going to keep going up. So I don't know what else to say other than get some Bitcoin.
Well, and the other argument is in the short term, Bitcoin might correct, and that there is a chance. You've said that this bull run has a lot more runway. Why do you think that? Because when everybody thinks it's going to 250K, it often doesn't.
Well, I sure got it wrong in the last cycle when I said it was going to go up to 100K. Again, I get a lot of things wrong. But I do actually, looking back, I think there were some real reasons why that happened. I mean, I can point to them. I don't know if it's important right now. I think what we should concentrate on is this cycle is a little different than other cycles. If you look at the cycles and you look at the charts right now, this cycle actually mirrors 16, 17, very close. And that was a hell of a cycle. And I believe we'll continue up that slope. And we have a lot higher to go. My base case, I follow several models, and you're aware of the fact that I'm friends with James Checkmatey on X, and his Substack is Check on Chain. And I actually subscribe to that, and I follow all the charts. I just got off the charts 2 days ago, and he updates us. He keeps us in the loop about every 2 weeks. And then he has a whole suite of charts. So if you're listening to this and you thinking, well, I don't want to pay money for this information, you don't have to. The guy's really nice. He sticks all his charts out there. Just go on to the site. You can actually go through all the charts yourself. I just did it. And you know what? Things look great right now. This bouncing along sideways is terrific. I mean, it's the kind of, we're building a bull market that's it has legs. One of the things, getting back to the last cycle, one of the things I think happened there is we just went up too fast. We ran out of steam. We so high that there was an incentive for a lot of people to come into the space and sell. But then again, there were other things like the mining ban. There was a lot of stuff going on that I think choke point 2.0, I had no idea the depths of that. It's just coming to light now. So that's been an eye opener too. But anyway, I personally, for me, James, he's mad about giving you price points, but I will, because I'm an artist, and we already know I've had a brain injury. So I'll give you one. I'm thinking 225 to 285 is my base case in this next cycle. But when I said things have changed this cycle, the ETFs are just huge. I mean, that is a constant underpinned demand that I never would have guessed. I'd never thought we were going to see that. And surprisingly enough, about 80% of those buyers are retail. I didn't know that until recently. Van Eck put out some data, and that's what their estimate is, plus high net worth individuals and retail. So we haven't even really seen the wirehouses. We haven't seen, a lot of the hedge funds, pension funds, insurance funds. They're dipping their toe in, but they'll be here soon.
Yeah, they sure will. And with nation state adoption coming in, if the US buys, other nations will buy too.
I think that's already a done deal, and I don't mean the U.S. I mean, what I'm trying to say is it's too late. I mean, you're not going to stick the toothpaste back in the tube here. It's over. This is like, I'd have to say it was in Nashville. And, I didn't get down to Nashville this last time. I've been to the previous conferences, and some people might remember me. If you looked, I was out there painting on the floor and stuff, having a good time. But in that conference, when Senator Lummis, RFK, and even, President Trump, when they came out there and made their speeches, just felt like that was a major shift. I felt like we had crossed the Rubicon, and I don't know if you know where that term comes from, but it's like a point of no return. It's Julius Caesar. He's standing on the northern shore of the Rubicon River, and he's a very, his troops loved him. He was a very successful general, but he was in the north. He wasn't in Italy properly or in Rome. And he was standing on that river. It was against Roman law for him to cross that river with his army towards Rome. And he did. And I can't remember, he said in Latin, Elena jacta est. The die is cast. There's no going back. I mean, he either would be successful and, the Roman Empire would begin, the Republic would die, or he would be executed. And I feel like right now, it doesn't really matter if the U.S. sticks around. Other nations, I mean, they see the writing on the wall. And I'm sure you saw what happened in Russia this was at Christmas time. For the very first time in history that I'm aware of, the Russian finance minister said on air, we have settled global trade now in Bitcoin. That's a pretty powerful thing. And Putin, his comment about who can stop Bitcoin, nobody. I mean, that's him. That's Putin speaking to that forum, the finance forums. I think we're in a different place now,
Yeah. I think Bitcoin is in the space. We're at the point where burn the boats.
Yeah, exactly. It's like Michael Saylor with MicroStrategy. I love that expression, burn the boats, because I've always felt like that's what it's like with him. I didn't intend to get so heavily involved in MicroStrategy. Another example of how stupid I am is, I bought I bought MicroStrategy. It was like $20 a share, and that was unsplit. So I don't know where it is today, but it's probably like 3,500, 4,000 in those dollars. But then it went up like 5 or 6 times, and I sold it. I sold all of it. But about a year, it's been over a year now. I started doing more research on it. I could never figure out what the whole point of MicroStrategy or Saylor was. I mean, what is he doing? Is he's buying up constant Bitcoin, and it's like he's going to just sit there the rest or he's going to be like Uncle Scrooge from the old cartoons. He's got this pile of Bitcoin below him, and he just goes and dives in it and swims around, and that just doesn't sound like Saylor. So I do know in my mind where Saylor's going with this, and once I figured that out, I bought quite a bit of Bitcoin, or MicroStrategy. But the thing is, it's just gone so crazy since then that it's huge. I mean, in my portfolio, it's gotten really big, and I don't sell stuff like that. I just keep it.
And I see Michael Saylor made another buy. They've now owned 478,740 Bitcoin.
Yeah, at about 64,000 a piece, they're getting it. And when I said burning the boats, I mean they're on a journey. And he's actually said this in the previous earnings call, not this last one. He said, we're in this journey together. He says that to the shareholders. He said, we're in this together. And I feel like I am on the MicroStrategy boat. And he's on a one-way trip. He's like Julius Caesar in the sense that he can never sell Bitcoin. I mean, if he sold one Bitcoin out of that stack, that the whole story, the narrative behind MicroStrategy would collapse. We're counting on him every time to use that MNAV, that premium, to buy more Bitcoin. And I can prove it. Anybody's curious. I ended up last year at the end of 12 months, I had 74% more Bitcoin per share than if I had just gone out on spot and bought it. And the reason I say burning the boats is because I always think he's getting off the boat. He's on the shore and he's looking at us and the crew there. They've got about 2,500 people working there. And he just tells everybody, burn the boat, because we're going one way and we're just buying Bitcoin. That is our journey.
Yep. And he's made a promise never to sell.
Yeah.
Do you think when Bitcoin corrects, MicroStrategy will have a problem?
Never. Not at all. There's not a price that it's going to go to where they have a problem. Most people don't understand that. When they issue the ATM, it's capital right onto their balance sheet. The debt instruments they've issued, they're not carried on their balance sheet. Bitcoin would have to go down to like $3,000, I think, before they ended up trying to cover. And most of these debt instruments are already in the money. So I never am worried about that. I mean, they've been very smart. They even let out in the last earnings calls, they told people, they said, our goal is to maintain 20 to 30% debt ratio, and their Bitcoin holdings to the amount that they're financing, and they've done that. And as long as they use intelligent leverage, as they said they're going to, and continue that program, I don't think this is going to stop for some time. Bernstein just came out, the wealth fund or manager, and they came out about maybe not even 2 months ago, and they said that MicroStrategy is going to get 1 million Bitcoin. That's their goal. And their forecast, they put on a new price target of $600 a share. And I think that's really low. I think in that third earnings call, when Michael Saylor had that earnings call and they discussed the 21-21 plan, I think the moment that they discussed that, they created a $1 trillion company. Right now, their market cap's just under 100, and I do believe it'll be a $1 trillion company. There's no doubt in my mind.
So he could be the richest man in the world.
He will be. He will be the richest man in the world.
As a Bitcoiner. Pretty cool.
It is pretty cool.
Do you think it's important to run a node?
I do. It's funny you should say that because, again, if anybody's looking, they're going, well, this guy's an old boomer. Well, guess what? You're right. It takes 3 boomers to open a PDF file. I actually am pretty good with technology. I like technology. I like reading about it. I like doing it and stuff. But I tried to set up a node and I did it by myself. And I know if I'd asked like Ben Sessions or somebody to help me, they would have. But I just thought, I want to see how hard this is or easy. And, it's kind of a pain in the ass. And I thought, I want something simpler. So I was just looking at the Apollo 2 unit a couple days ago. I think I'm going to get that. And then you can mine your own Bitcoin. It gets up to I think maybe up to 6 terahash. And I looked at the dynamics behind it as far as the power usage and stuff. But what's neat is you get to run your own node. I have used Sparrow before, which is a software in conjunction with my cold card wallet, which I really like. I have moved my hardware wallet out of my house recently. I mentioned this before, but offline, but I am concerned about physical security. I've done some different things around my home, and I even on my personal, you know, situation here. But yeah, I am concerned about that. So I've gotten rid of the wallet.
Yeah, it's smart. We really have to take security very seriously going forward. And I just brought up the node because I've been listening to, Bitcoin University on that and the importance of having many nodes all over the Bitcoin network so that when these big entities buy Bitcoin and there's a lot of Bitcoin in one place, we still have those nodes spread across the world.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, you're right on in the sense that right now there are 21,000 full reachable nodes on the system. And when you think about the role of a node, and I just mentioned using Sparrow, to get a transaction on the base layer. Well, to do that, when you send or receive, you have to find a node. You must use a node to connect to the Bitcoin network. Otherwise, you won't. So most people, when they're using a hardware wallet, and a lot of the ones that are produced today, they're using that company's node instead of their own node. So you are, trusting them in one sense. And to have your own node empowers you like that. And once you get that onto the node's template and it broadcasts to the other nodes, it's almost instantaneous that your transaction then is broadcast across the network. So having that network widespread and diverse is only good for Bitcoin. This other subject that I was talking about, as far as maybe not transacting on the base layer, that might be in the future someday. And then the other, because of fees. And then the other thing is, for me personally, I'm probably not going to be transacting on the base layer again unless it's through, like, say, a custody multi-sig arrangement, that type of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I was just thinking about your background and you've reinvented yourself so many times. Do you think that makes you also a risk taker? Do you think that drew you to Bitcoin?
I definitely am a risk taker. You're right about that. I mean, I have done that. It was when I went out in the oil fields. I mean, it was a risky job, and then I ended up, when I became a cop, that was a risky job because back in those days, I worked in a kind of real small western city, but it was real rough. I mean, it was a rough town, man. You couldn't go into a bar by yourself in uniform; they might beat the shit out of you. And in fact, when I got on the department, my staff sergeant came up to me and he gave me a big helmet, big riot helmet. And he said, "Do not go into a bar, son, unless you're wearing this helmet." So, okay. They gave us, nobody really had bulletproof vests in those days, but our department got them early and gave me one. And one of the reasons was it was, if anything, to prevent a shiv or a knife just slipping in. I mean, it was a rough town. But I, I don't know. The thing is, it's so weird, this question, because yeah, I enjoyed taking risks, but I don't feel that Bitcoin's a risk anymore. It's almost like risk free or risk off. I don't worry about it. I mean, do you?
I was hoping you'd go there because we don't look at Bitcoin as a risk. Just many people do, though.
Yeah, that is the common narrative. I'd say that's very true. I mean, most of the people I talk to, they look at the volatility, of course, and the volatility is sickening. I talk about buying, but some of these dips when I bought, I already was pretty invested in Bitcoin. And so I'm putting more of my retirement and savings into Bitcoin. It's dropping. I'm wondering if I'm doing the right thing. Sometimes you almost feel like you're going to go walk around the block and get sick or something. I mean, it's serious stuff. And, it shakes you out. Most people can't handle that. There's three charts that I like to follow. I mentioned charts earlier. I follow the Meyer multiple. Thank you, Trace, if you're out there, by the way. Thank you for that. The Meyer multiple. And I like to follow the MVRV Z score, by the way. I follow that, which accounts for lost coins, Satoshi's coins. So I think it's more accurate. And that gives me an idea of what kind of unrealized profit and loss is in the system. And you can follow it for two cohorts, short-term holders and long-term holders. And we'll get back to what you just mentioned in a minute. And then the last one is SOPR, which gives me spent output, which gives me an idea of what kind of profits or losses are being realized in the network. And so, you can look at those short-term holders, and what you see is that often they're buying like at the worst times, and then they're just plummeting in that volatility. And then they finally get to a point where they can't stand it and they sell at the totally wrong time. And it's pitiful to watch. So if you think of Bitcoin as a risk, you know what? You're going to end up down there. You're going to be one of those people. So you got to study. And at some point, no matter whether you're a risk taker by nature or you're just a quiet, maybe a CPA, at some point you'll realize that Bitcoin's not risk. And then you'll just buy and relax like I do.
Yep, very good point. It always comes back to education. The more you learn, the less risky Bitcoin becomes.
Yeah.
Let's go back to, do you think the meme coin mania is over?
Oh, no, not even. No, it's possible we haven't started. I mean, what was it, like 2 million of them the other day on that Brian Armstrong was whining about? What a little crybaby he is. So, no, they're not going away. We are a gambling society, right? And, meme coins are made for gamblers. And if you look recently, one of the good news for Bitcoiners, and you should all rejoice in this, is that, if you look at Bitcoin's adoption rate, it's still going up. And you look at these, shit coins and these old meme coins, they're not going anywhere. They're detaching from Bitcoin. That's great. And I'm talking about like market cap, how much we account for the network, it's just growing. And I think it's well over 60% now. And so that's terrific. But these meme coins, this is gambling. And people, for some reason, actually, I know why, but there's a reason why people are gambling in this country. And it's a kind of a sad state of affairs that's tied to a really big macro picture. And which is one of the things that Larry's book discusses. How do we get out of this nightmare? Yeah, it's kind of sad to see, but I don't think it's going anywhere. There'll probably be 3 million next week or something. And then, you know what? It could be just like the NFTs, just die on the vine. When people have had enough pain, it'll die.
So the pain you talk about is that inflation is making it really difficult for people to live the life that they want to live. The US dollar is not storing their wealth, even though we still have the best shirt in the dirty laundry. And people go into gambling because they're trying to get ahead. But like many of us, they learn the hard way and eventually find Bitcoin. That's the hope.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what have you learned this year from your studies in Bitcoin?
Well, I really have been spending a lot of time working on this idea of scalability, like trying to get in my head how this is going to work in the future. I went back to some of the discussions between Hal Finney and others, and even Satoshi, talking about scaling in the base layer and layer two solutions. I mean, this was something that was being discussed a long time ago. Hal Finney, he's very clear in one of his posts about this in 2010. I mean, this idea of where we're going to go next, which is the repeal of SOB 121. And it's very obvious that he sees a future where Bitcoin is like the reserve asset on a bank, a balance sheet, and that tokens would be on this system backed by Bitcoin, and that Bitcoin would be collateral. I think that with that repeal, I think we're going to see more of that.
You mentioned the buy, borrow, die dynasty. Tell us
Yeah.
why you think that's coming.
Well, that's a good question, because that ties right into what we just said. I mean, And, buy, borrow, die, that's not my moniker. I mean, that's been used many times. It's an investment strategy we can talk about. I just add dynasty to it because I think that's going to apply to Bitcoiners. I mean, you're going to create, a dynasty. If you're listening right now and you're holding any kind of Bitcoin at all, I mean, you are going to create generational wealth. And if you're smart, you're going to keep it. You'll never sell it. When you look back and you think about families that have preserved wealth over a long period of time, they have done so using that strategy. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to buy assets that will provide a rate of return that's greater than either the cost of capital or the inflation rate. They're trying to preserve their wealth and at the same time grow it. Now, traditionally in the past, that's been through land or owning your own banks, like the Rothschilds or the royal family or the Arnauts with their name brands. But today, I don't think that you could find anything on this planet that could provide a greater return going forward over the years than Bitcoin. In my mind, it's Bitcoin. I wouldn't even, if you're familiar with opportunity cost, that means the cost of what you just, when you pass up an asset, that is what you just lost. So you're in a very place where real estate's incredibly expensive and going up all the time. And if I gave you $1 million right now, let me ask you, I mean, would you buy real estate right now or would you buy Bitcoin?
So I just sold my investment property for Bitcoin.
Well, that answers the question, doesn't it? So it's very obvious that it's Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So if you
I
buy,
would put at least 80% in Bitcoin.
and that's smart. I'm not saying that you're going to put it all in Bitcoin so you have just enough money for a sandwich. No, you probably have other things you want to do in life too. I like watches. I buy watches once in a while. I just love watches. It's an illness. But anyway, so what I'm trying to say is that all those Bitcoiners that are listening right now, if you're watching this, you have that opportunity. You can create a dynasty just like the Rothschilds, and that dynasty can live on past you. And most Bitcoiners will say immediately, well, that's not true because let's say I had, a lot of money in Bitcoin. I can't eat a Bitcoin, can't live in a Bitcoin. But the thing is, with the repeal of SOB 121, with 122 now, banks are going to come in here and they're going to be custodying, they're going to sell, they're going to buy, they're going to trade, they're going to custody Bitcoin. And if you own Bitcoin, you are going to be in a prime position to lend that out for yield. And this is where the poop emojis really come in and land on me, because a lot of Bitcoiners are going to have PTSD, just like myself, from in 22. And we saw what happens. Bitcoin doesn't generate yield. But let's just say you had a bunch of Bitcoin and I'm right. Let's say in 20 years, you're sitting on $13 million or something. And, a tenth of a Bitcoin at a 40% CAGR over 20 years, that's almost $9 million. Now, if I gave you $9 million today, I think you could probably live off of it and never spend it. Why? Because you could just take out 1 month short. You could take out a 3-month treasury bill. You could make $360,000 or more right now this year just on that and never spend a dime of it. And if it was Bitcoin, so what's the difference there? If it's a treasury and it's in dollars, that's a shit coin too. And you're losing money every year. You're not going to, at 4.25%, you're not going to beat real inflation. But guess what? With Bitcoin, you can. You could do the same thing. You could use the same technique with Bitcoin. And every year you would get wealthier and wealthier. And you could spend that. You could even take out buy, borrow, die is you're basically taking out small loans, maybe every year, every 3 years, intelligent loans, just like MicroStrategy. You're just paying things off as you go. And you're educating your family about how this works and why you never sell the Bitcoin. You're establishing trusts. You're maybe charitable trust also. You can keep that wealth just as the wealthy families do today forever. So that's kind of what that philosophy is about.
Well, Bitcoin is pristine collateral, right? That's what
Mm-hmm.
I think Leon Wankum says. I'm speaking to him tomorrow, and he's saying the same thing as you. So there are many smart people out there saying that now.
And the thing is too that I didn't mention this, but when you think about it, what's the interest rate on your loan going to be? So if you look at right now, today, that it sucks. I mean, you would not do that, what I'm talking about today. This is in the future when all these banking products come in and they're all going to be trying to get your Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin generates no yield, then if you're receiving yield, you have a risk associated with that. It's up to you, the Bitcoiner, to figure out what your level of risk tolerance is, like we talked about, and how much of that Bitcoin you're willing to put at risk. And if you can figure that out and you're comfortable with it, so you sleep well at night, then you've got it made. And I'm not saying that there won't be problems, failures. MicroStrategy, Saylor talks about doing this. So he sees this as a future where Bitcoin is tokenized behind banks, where they're using it as a reserve asset. He even mentions names: JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs. Talks about the fact that what if you're in a country that, with its own printing press backing the currency? What if you have FDIC insurance on these small amounts that you're willing to lend out? There's a lot of things coming. We just don't know what it is yet.
True. It's exciting.
It is.
So, just to end with, George, tell us a little bit about your art and how you went from all these high octane professions and now you are a calm, quiet artist.
I'm many things, but I'm not calm. Sometimes I love to paint when I'm just throwing shit all over the studio, and I'm always pushing my boundaries with my art. I am constantly. You see behind me, that shoulder, you can see Dorian Nakamoto, the CEO of Bitcoin, and I've got air quotes up here for people that aren't watching. And there's an actual one of those little gold coins in it, And then on the bottom, I don't have it right now because I had to get a new one shipped in, but I've got a Mars lander, a miner, and it's plugged into that. And so when it's running, it actually lights up and everything. There's a little miner that runs back and forth he's like mining Bitcoin. And so, I don't stay static there. The thing is, I don't really want to talk about my art, but what I would like to talk about is that one of the things I do is I just try to create things that make me happy. Some of these paintings, that they're done with archival materials, they'll last 200-300 years, no problem. They'll probably need a cleaning, and they could go more. I mean, they could last centuries. But a lot of Bitcoiners, you are going to be in a position in the future where you can get off this damn hamster wheel where, both family members are working. If you could mine the kids out to work, you might do that. I mean, everybody's trying to work, trying to just keep their heads above water. And that's a fiat world. That's the fiat world that we live in. And, there is going to be a future, and it's coming, and it is going to be sound money. It's going to be Bitcoin. And when people say sound money or hard money, what they're talking about is money that can't be inflated. It's tied to something. And that's coming. And I don't know how it's going to transpire, but I know that Bitcoin is going to become a bigger part of the world's wealth system. And at some point, you're going to be able to get off the damn hamster wheel and do some things you want to do in life. Do something good in life, or some hobby, play a guitar, do woodworking. Go out there and just, maybe you want to change your life around and exercise or something, or different, go to the Himalayas, or maybe over in some maybe in Bhutan, and, take up a new religion or a way of living or something. And that will all come true if you just do like I said. All you got to do is get the damn Bitcoin, hang on to it, and then don't lose it, and you'll be fine.
I'm hearing time is our most valuable resource.
It is. Yeah, time is finite, and health is more important than wealth, and time is finite, and love conquers all. I mean, if love's above all of them, if you can find somebody that thinks you're the king of the mountain, like I found somebody who treats me like I'm she treats me like I'm a king, and it's pretty cool. And you find somebody like that, it puts you in front of them. I do the same thing with her. She is my number one thing, and I still, like, sometimes I like to open the truck door for her and stuff. And she's my queen. She treats me like a king. I treat her like a queen. And so, yeah, you find somebody like that, got your Bitcoin, man, you are set.
Here. What a great place to end. Thank you, George. Tell us where people can find you.
If you're interested in my art, you can just type my name in Google. But really, the only social platform I'm on anymore is X. I wouldn't even waste my time with these other things. X. I really was not a fan when Elon Musk took over X, but I was, again, I was wrong. And so I'm on X. Just type in my call sign that I had in the Navy when I was in the fighter community. It's Jethro. It's capital JETHROE. And then again, because I'm a boomer, I just put 111 on the end of it. I have no idea why. So Jethro 111.
Thank you. Thanks so much for joining me.
Oh, you're welcome, and everybody have a great day. It's a new world, and we're gonna have fun.